Hotep, everybody. This is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network and host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian, and national political commentator. It is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. And I want to talk about this story. I posted on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and it deals with recent comments from veteran actor Morgan Freeman. Okay. And it reiterates some comments that Morgan Freeman has made before about Black History Month. Some comments I would say are uninformed comments. This is an article from independent.co.uk. Morgan Freeman says he detests Black History Month, quote unquote, it's not right. He says, my history is American history, and he's promoting a new document. I think it's a documentary or movie he has out. But he did an interview with Variety magazine. And in this interview with Variety, in the new interview with Variety, Morgan Freeman elaborated on those feelings. He said, I detest it. He said of Black History Month, he said, quote, the mere idea of it, you are going to give me the shortest month in a year. Are you going to celebrate my history? This whole idea makes my teeth itch. It's not right, end quote. He added, my history is American history. It's the one thing in this world I am interested in, beyond making money, having a good time, and getting enough sleep, end quote. Okay. He's currently promoting The Gray House, a Civil War era historical drama he produced along with Kevin Costner. All right. So, yes, he's interested in history, and he did a series on the History Channel as well, dealing with African Americans in history. But he's grossly wrong about Black History Month, African American History Month, which was created in 1926 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, okay, who co-founded the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, September 9th, 1915. So these comments here are similar to comments Morgan Freeman made in 2006 in an interview with Mike Wallace for 60 Minutes. If we just look at this briefly, and then what I'm going to do is on March 31st, 2024, I interviewed one of my friends and fellow historians, Professor Manu Ampim. Okay. And Professor Manu Ampim, we talked about a number of different topics. And the main topic was dealing with the history of African civilizations. But we also talked about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, in the father of Black history, and we talked about African American History Month, Black History Month, and Dr. Woodson's work dealing with African history also. Okay, so I'm going to play that interview next for you, an excerpt of that interview what we did with Dr. Carter G. Woodson. But there's a total misunderstanding of this history. First of all, Black History Month was never designed to be the only time of the year we celebrate our history. Okay. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson, when we look here at this presentation that I do for Black History Month, Woodson founded Negro History Week in 1926. He explained the reason behind the celebration in a pamphlet widely distributed months before the first celebration was to take place during the second week in February 1926. The reason why the month of February was chosen, okay, and we created Negro History Week, African American History Month. We created this. White people did not give us this, okay? The reason why the month of February was chosen is not because it's the shortest month of the year. It's not because it's the coldest month of the year. It's because the second week in February contains the birth dates of Frederick Douglass, which is February 14th. That's the assumed birth date for Frederick Douglass, because he was a former slave and he didn't know the exact date of his birth or the exact year of his birth. It was either 1817 or 1818, he thought. And also February 12th is the birth date of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so After Frederick Douglass dies in 1895, we're going to have celebrations in the African American community celebrating Frederick Douglass' birthday. And after Lincoln is assassinated, April 1865, we're going to have celebrations celebrating Abraham Lincoln's birthday as well. Okay. Because of the Civil War is going to lead to the African slaves being freed. The Civil War was not fought to free the slaves. It was fought to bring the South back into the Union, but it's going to lead to the slaves being freed. So because you already had these celebrations taking place in the African American community during the second week of February, Dr. Carter G. Woodson inserted his new monthly cultural or weekly, his new cultural celebration during that same period of time. It had nothing to do with it being the shortest month of the year. Okay. And if you just need to have 30 days to celebrate Black History Month, so you feel like a full human being or something like this, you can still celebrate March 1st and March 2nd. Okay, it's not against the law to continue to celebrate March 1st and March 2nd if you just have to have 30 days. But Dr. Woodson exclaimed that Blacks knew practically nothing about their history. Okay, African Americans knew practically nothing about their history. He ultimately believed that African Americans could benefit immensely from knowledge of their past and accomplishments of their ancestors. He added that race prejudice was the byproduct of whites' belief that Black people had not contributed anything of worth to world civilization. All right. And Dr. Woodson wrote a number of books. Miseducation of the Negro in 1933 was his most popular book, but he also wrote African Background Outlined as well. He wrote books dealing with the history of Africa also. Dr. Woodson argued that if the historical record was set straight, that if the history of Black people were studied along with the achievements of others in schools, not only would Black youth develop a sense of pride and self-worth, but racism would also be abolished. Dr. Woodson, so contrary to popular belief, Black History Month was never designed to be the only time of the year we study our history or celebrate our history. Okay. Dr. Woodson said that the history of African Americans had to be taught year round. Negro History Week was the first major achievement in popularizing Black history and was unique in that it focused on Black youth. Okay. It wasn't only for African American youth, but it focused on Black youth. Woodson realized that the miseducation of Black people began in their homes, communities, and elementary schools. Dr. Woodson's vision of Negro History Week was optimistic, strategic, and long-term. Optimistic, strategic, and long-term. He wanted the modest week-long celebration to serve as a stepping stone toward the gradual introduction of Black history into the curricula of all levels of the U.S. educational system. Okay. And he said that teachers needed to diligently prepare for the celebration months in advance as well. And he said Negro History Week should be a demonstration of what has been done in the study of the Negro during the year, and at the same time as a demonstration of greater things to be accomplished. He said this was in his instruction to school teachers. Okay. He said that a subject which receives attention 1 week out of the 36 will not mean much to anyone. Read Dr. Peril Dagbovi's fantastic book on Dr. Carter G. Woodson called Carter G. Woodson in Washington, D.C., the father of Black history. Okay, so there's a lot of just gross, total misunderstanding of African American History Month. And in the segment from the interview I did with historian Professor Manu Ampim, professor at Contra Costa College, Professor Manu Ampim talks about moving to African Heritage Month as well. And he talks about how a lot of African Americans are afraid of embracing African culture, African history. And he also has criticisms for ASALH Today, Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which is the organization that Dr. Carter G. Woodson co-founded September 9th, 1915. Before we go to the excerpt of the interview I did with Professor Manu Ampim, I want to remind you, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and register for the online history classes that I teach on the weekend. And we have our Juneteenth, my latest lecture here as well, dealing with the real history Juneteenth. That's in digital download and on DVD format. But Saturdays, I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. So the next classes for that are June 22nd and June 29th, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register for that. We have our class lesson plan here that you could read and actually download. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And Sunday, June 23rd, my new class starts up, 10-week online history course, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. That class is on sale, $80. Register for that. You can register for both classes in the course bundle. It's on sale right now, $120 for the course bundle. But this is a fantastic class, and we look at history from 1800 through 1968, 1970 to see what leads up to the Civil War taking place, what happens after the Civil War ends, the Reconstruction era, Jim Crow era, what leads the laws and policies put in place to lead us to where we are today, to understand where we need to go from here. Now, we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. Even after the course is over with, you can go back and watch the entire course, okay? So visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. The content is PG-13, so you can use this content with our children. Also, I have other lectures that I've done there as well in DVD format and digital download format at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And you can support the African History Network, $, the AHN Show, through Cash App, $, the AHN Show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. So we have the information right here on the homepage and our link to Cash App and PayPal as well. And information about the African History Network show, Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Here's the interview, an excerpt of the interview I did March 31st, 2024 with historian Professor Manu Ampim. So when you talk about Dr. Carter G. Woodson in your book as well, and you in the broadcast that you did December 15th, 2023, you talked about how Dr. Carter G. Woodson is left out of the conversation dealing with African history, African culture, things of this nature. But his last two books dealt with African history. He had African history background, and then he was working on another one. But he also had a book on African folklore, African myths and folklore as well. Talk about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who most of us know, co-founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, September 9th, 1915. Created Negro History Week, second week in February 1926. Talk about his research in Africa, dealing with African history and culture.
Yeah, that's one of the most important developments in the 20th century regarding African civilizations. Carter G. Woodson is very much omitted without justification from the focus and discussion on bringing African civilizations to the forefront. One of the things that Woodson did, I mean, he created his organization, the Association for the Study. At that time, it's called Negro Life and History. Now it's Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And Woodson began to do his work in the early 20th century. And when Woodson was around up until when he passed in 1950, his focus was increasingly on African civilizations. But from the time that Woodson led the charge to make the focus on history of Black people front and center, when he created the week in the second week of February 1926, Africa had always been a central component for Woodson. So and he's left out. So a couple of things that folks should know: he wrote several books on Africa. You mentioned
Right.
African myths and folk tales. That was one. The last two books he wrote was African Heroes and Heroines, and the last book is the African Background Outline. That was
Right.
the last two books. Not only that, but the last three articles written by the great scholar who passed in 1950. The
Right.
last three articles written by Woodson was a article series simply called Egypt, a 3-part series, and it was called Egypt because for Woodson, the mission was to bring back the missing pages, the missing chapters, and the missing volumes of the Black contribution to U.S. and world history. So for Woodson, this was unacceptable that Black people had been written out of the story of U.S. and world history and contributions. So for him, it was to establish our humanity. So when Woodson is focusing on in his essays and his books and his presentations to his organization, when he's arguing that there has to be the missing pages put back into the story, he's not just talking about the experience here in the U.S. He's looking at a global experience. When he says world history, he means just that. But so when Woodson was around, not only is he writing about African civilizations in his articles, his essays, and his books, but even the theme of the organization. You look at the organizational themes, and you see a number of themes during the lifetime of Woodson dealing specifically with Africa. Since that
Right.
time, the organization's moved away from Woodson's position on Africa. And the problem is that people don't even know. If they look at the journal the journal, now it's a Journal of African American Life and History, but the Journal of Negro History,
Negro history.
when that was founded in 1916, the very first issue is dealing with Africa. And not only that, but he has a team of writers who are focusing on Africa. So they from the very first issue of the journal, volume 1, number 1, there's several articles dealing with Africa, and they constantly did book reviews, and they're on Africa, not only from the first issue of the volume of the journal all the way through. But not only that, but even the bulletin. Later on, they created the bulletin of then it was called Bulletin of Negro History. Now it's a bulletin of the Black History Bulletin. But in 1937, the very first issue, Woodson, as the editor, he has a big old picture of Africa on page 6, a big old picture on the very first issue. And in fact, all the way through, there is focus on Africa, and this gets left out of the scholarly discussion, and when scholars are looking at the Black history movement, they leave out Woodson and his unique focus on African civilizations. Like, for example, let me just give one example of what gets left out. So in March of 1939, the so-called Negro History Bulletin, which was designed and focused on for teachers, so that teachers can teach the students, this is what Woodson wrote. He says sculpture reached its first, sorry, let me go to the title. The title is The Negro in Art, From Africa to America. And this is the March 1939 issue, volume 2, number 6. And this is what Woodson writes. He says sculpture reached its first high level in ancient times under the Egyptians. The Sphinx near the pyramids of Giza, the temple at Luxor, the rock temple at Abu Simbel, and the obelisk show the greatness of Egyptian architecture and sculpture. And so he's claiming Egypt or Kemet as an African civilization, but he's writing articles all the way through. He's reviewing books like Lorenzo Turner on Africanisms in the Gullah dialect, and Woodson's reviewing the books like that because Africa was front and center for Woodson. There's not a time that Woodson was not writing articles and or books about Africa, or his organization having themes dealing specifically with Africa. What Osla has done, and you mentioned Daryl Scott, he's one of the last persons defending Woodson when Woodson said that self-publishing is self-defense. And so what the organization has done, they've left out Woodson's work on Africa, not because it's not there, because they're uncomfortable. So Professor Scott, Dr. Scott, he was arguing that how in the world could you disregard the work of Woodson when he established in 1922 the Associated Publishers. He said that
Associated Publishers Inc. Yep, the publishing company.
1922. And so the thing is that Woodson said that nobody can edit and change your work if you're publishing yourself. So that's why for him, he can say whatever he wanted to say. Like you had the great book there, The Miseducation. He was able to say what he wanted to say, when he wanted to say it, and who he wanted to say it to. But what the organization did is decide to disrespect the tradition, disrespect Woodson. And now if you want to get the journal, you got to go through the University of Chicago. And Dr. Scott was one of the last battlers to say, this doesn't make sense. This is not Woodson. This is not Woodson's tradition. But guess what? Those folks are the one, and they may be listening. So what? Challenge the evidence. They're the ones uncomfortable with Africa. That's why they.
I get that impression. I get that impression that many of them are uncomfortable with Africa.
They're uncomfortable with Africa, and that's why they would rather give up independence against Woodson's position and give the publication to the University of Chicago. So, folks, if you want to get the journal of what's now called a Journal of African American History, or get the back issues of the Journal of Negro History, you got to go through the big mainstream institution, University of Chicago Press, and not through the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, because those professionals who have the money and resources to remain independent, but they don't have the orientation. So they disrespect Woodson and they disrespect his tradition. There's no defense to it. So kudos to the guest you had on, because Brother
Dr. Scott.
Daryl Scott, he's one of the last ones fighting to try to keep a respectful focus on Woodson's vision. So not only has the organization give up the independent publishing apparatus, but they've abandoned Africa. And you look at the theme. Now everything is African American. There's nothing wrong with that. But look, Brother Michael, here's how we do it in the Woodson tradition.
And I have some of the themes. Go ahead, keep talking, because we got some of the themes. Because there's been a theme. There's been an annual theme for Black History Month, Negro History Week, African American History Month since 1928. Yes. Okay, and Dr. Woodson picked these themes. He died in 1950. Go ahead and then we're going to go over a few of these themes that dealt with Africa, because most African Americans don't know there's been an annual theme for Black History Month. When I do my presentations on African American History Month, I said we don't have to keep recycling the same 15 to 20 sanitized Negroes every year. We don't understand how powerful this monthly cultural celebration is and why it was actually created. Go ahead.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, to that list, we'll also put 1972 on that list: African art, music, literature, and a valuable cultural experience. But look, I'm glad you have that there, because this is new information that gets omitted. So if we look at the focus of the annual themes, Africa's front and center, because when Woodson said that the goal was to put back in the missing pages of world history, what the hell do you think they was talking about? World history is talking about Africa. So that's why you have African themes. And the last African theme was really 1992, because and it was because of the great work of Van Sertima and others who challenged and exposed Columbus. And that's about it since that time. But everything's been just okay. Now here's what we do in the tradition of Woodson. Two important things I want people to know. Number one, in the current theme by Osala, and they set the national theme for those that follow them. This year is African Americans and labor. So we changed it. It's we have ours was the classical African contributions in art from Africa to the Americas. Because for us, there's no way to separate the Black experience in the Americas from the African background and origin. And so whenever they have a theme only focusing on African American, we add the African component to it every single time. But so they have African Americans in the arts. That's okay, but it's not in the Woodsonian tradition. The Woodsonian tradition would be the achievements in art in Africa and the Americas. That's why I read this article he wrote, "The Negro in Art from Africa to America." That's in the Woodsonian tradition, and but the people are not comfortable with Africa. And like the great Kwame Ture said, if you start your history in slavery, the best you can be is a good slave. And that's what we're dealing with now. We have people that have disrespected Woodson, and they have only focused on African American because that's what they're comfortable with. So that's one issue to be aware of. The other issue is that it should be properly called. If we're following Woodson's direction and his leadership and his insight, it should be called African Heritage Month, because that's what we're focusing on, African heritage. When people say Black History Month, to them, it means to focus on issues of struggle, of how Black people overcome slavery, escape slavery, or how they got their ass kicked by the police or something like that. Right. And what Woodson was concerned about after the celebration was founded in 1926, if we see Woodson in the 1930s, he's criticizing at that time what was being done, always talking about something negative in Black people. He said, look, we have to assert our humanity. We have to look at Black contributions, achievements, and contributions in the world, and not always associate Black people with a problem. This is why Woodson focused on it as a celebration. And he's embracing Africa. They had plays, they had all kind of skits, plays, all kind of things, important information about contributions, because Woodson understood that we had to assert our humanity and use at least some time of the year to focus on our unique achievements, accomplishments, and contributions in the world. And this is why he continues to embrace Africa. So as he's learning more, he's writing more about it. But what's happened is that people are more and more, they're uncomfortable with Africa. They leave out Woodson's focus on Africa. So when they say Black History Month, it means really, as some of us would say, it's a Negro version where you're only dealing with safe folks who are only, you can only talk about them if they're fighting against slavery or during the civil rights or human rights era, which are great struggles, but it's very limited in scope. And so African Heritage Month means that we have to embrace Africa as we look at the overall Black contributions. This is why at our college, we've always had themes that associate the celebration. That's what we have with Africa and our experience in the Americas. And we tell folks that we do not endorse all of the negativity you all want to bring in February, because this is a chance for us to assert our humanity. So it should be African Heritage Month as a reminder that Africa must be the foundation for our perspective. But those that are dealing with Black History Month, most of that is negative. Like, for example, I saw a flyer, somebody shared something with me that somebody had a Black History Month event, and all I saw was a fashion show and some drinking. So what the hell is this? This is a Black History Month event. You know what I mean? Because it ain't got nothing to do with Africa, and it's got nothing to do with contributions to humanity. So, Brother Michael, what's important is that we reteach and re-educate even the informed community, the so-called, whatever they call it, the conscious community, to shift, because this is the only way in which we can take back the focus created by Woodson and separate it from all this craziness and make sure that we define it as African Heritage Month and force people to have positive events that embrace our unique contributions to humanity, which I lay out in my book. I have a whole section on these contributions in math, medicine, architecture, social organization, medicine, you name it. And these contributions must be front and center. And this is what the concern was of Woodson, as he was criticizing those folks that only focused on problems and not the contributions of Black people.
Excellent, excellent. And the name of Professor Manu Ampim's book again is A History of African Civilizations. This is the second revised edition, A History of African Civilizations. You can get it at his website, advancingtheresearch.org, advancingtheresearch.org. We have it up here on the screen. We're going to put the link again here in the thread of the broadcast. Please support this brother. Order his book today. This is great reading material, great material to use with your children. I'm going to pull this back up, this slide I have, because this is a slide from my African American History Month presentations. And this is research I did years ago. If we just look at some of the themes, now there's been an annual theme since 1928. And if you go to Asala's website, asala.org, asalh.org, they have all the themes going back to 1928, annual themes. 1928, Civilization, a World Achievement. 1933, Ethiopia Meets Era in Truth. 1935, The Negro Achievements in Africa. 1936, African Background Outlined. Now, we know Dr. Woodson died in 1950, but 1960, the annual theme was Strengthening America Through Education in Negro History and African Culture. I don't understand how you deal with Negro history and African culture, but okay. This is 1960. But in 1971, African Civilization and Culture, A Worthy Historical Background. And then we know let me see, I have a Sala's website up here right now. We know in, let's see, 1992, you talked about African Roots, Experience New Worlds, Pre-Columbus to Spatial Exploration. So that was the 500-year commemoration of Columbus setting sail on his first voyage. 1987, Afro-Americans and the Constitution from colonial times to the present, etc. Go ahead and talk about that for a minute. Then I have the article that I was looking for from the New York Times that talks about Brazil and South America.
Yeah, these themes, it clearly shows Woodson's consistent and well-rounded focus on Africa. And as you mentioned, he passed in 1950. So when the themes continued in 1960, 1971, 1972, it's because these are people that was still around that he was mentoring and influenced. But as time has gone on, they've separated. I'm talking about the organization from Woodson's focus on Africa, and the community and the public has fallen into this, unfortunately, of separating Woodson from Africa and separating his scholarship from Africa, because Woodson more and more was focusing on Egypt, Ethiopia. I mean, I can read so many different articles and statements that he made about Ethiopia as the forerunner of Kemet. He says that Ethiopia, which came first, it was the forerunner. And his book,
Ethiopia and Kush, Abyssinia, the grandmother. Yes. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. He's
talking about that, and he's mentioning in his book, the Negro in Our History. This is when in 1922, this is when he starts to focus on this. And the Negro in Our History, this was the definitive textbook for decades until John Hope Franklin wrote his book. But before John Hope Franklin's book, From Slavery to Freedom, Woodson's book, the Negro in Our History, was the standard text. And so every aspect of his work, including the organization, you see it through the themes. You see Woodson's influence on Africa. But Brother Michael, we would never know that today if you read and listen to these scholars today. It ain't that the evidence is hard to find. Like you say, anybody can go to Oslo's website and see the themes and see the other publications. It's not difficult, but of course, now you got to go to the University of Chicago. You can get some of these early volumes and get the articles on. So this is why it was important for me in the second revised edition. This is why it was important for me to expand the second edition and include a chapter on Woodson to blow up the myths and misinformation that is across the board. I mean, people who've read a lot, they know about the miseducation of the Negro, but there's a lot of other crucial and critical things that are not known about Woodson because we haven't read deeply enough, and scholars have carefully omitted Woodson's work on Africa. And that's why it's very important for me to get this information out. And when I've been doing presentations, people have been very surprised. Like for example, to show you Woodson's work, as he's the editor of the journal, so Journal of Negro History, Volume 1, Number 1, January 1916. Look, they have the first issue. This is what was impressive about Woodson. He wasn't writing alone. He had a team of writers that was making this contribution. So Monroe wrote a piece called The Passing Tradition and the African Civilization. This is the very first issue. And then there's Stafford, who wrote a book, The Mind of the African Negro, Africans, as reflected in this Proverbs. Then there is, and then there's a book review, another book review, Negro Culture in West Africa. Mm-hmm. So you got this in the very first volume. Woodson pulls together a pool of writers to help support his writing and scholarship in the area. So it's a body of writers focusing on Africa in the very early period, over 100 years ago. And we would never know that until we
Right.
pull up those themes, which are public. You don't even have to register and become a
Right.
member to see that. And then, and you got the journal, and there's the bulletin, plus there's Woodson's work. So this is why I added the chapter to the book, in order to blow up this nonsense about the misrepresentation. You talk about the miseducation of the Negro. This is miseducation all over again by his own organization,
Correct.
miseducating people about their own founder. And I'll challenge
Correct.
anybody, because documentation beats conversation. Is right there. And so,
Absolutely.
and this is a key. And you know what? This is the second time in my research that I found this. The first was when I was shocked to see that the biggest file that Dr. King kept was his file on Africa and the
Africa.
African liberation movements. So here you got two 20th century giants, and people around them have totally misrepresented the record because they're not comfortable. And not because these men didn't focus on Africa, it's because the propagandists have decided to omit this information. That's why it's so crucial, brother, to challenge people and make sure that we begin to call it and conceive of it and execute February as African Heritage Month, to break away from the craziness around Black History Month, where you got nothing but superficial events that have nothing to do with Woodson, and we should not want any part of that. And just to give people example, if they don't know what I'm talking about, they had an event at UC Berkeley out here a few years ago. It was some black guy. He had apparently success at getting some white nationalists out of the KKK. So that became a Black History Month event to show his success in getting some white supremacists out of the KKK. And they put that on our website at the college. Somebody told me about it. I said, you know what? You got a few minutes to take that nonsense down. So we don't support that. How in the hell does this become a part of our sacred celebration? You know, it's about achievements, accomplishments, and contributions in the world, and to assert our humanity and not deal with all of the negativity that we hear and know about and learn about all the time. We cannot always associate Black people with a problem, but that's why I'm focusing on it and really telling the community we got to break away and move forward in February in the Woodsonian tradition and embrace Africa.
Exactly. And just so people know, Dr. Woodson chose the second week in February, not because February is the shortest month of the year, but because it contains the birth dates of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, the assumed birth date of Douglass. Douglass didn't know his exact birthday, so he took the birth date of February 14th. Most of us know that as Valentine's Day. And then Abraham Lincoln's birthday, February 12th, because going back to when Frederick Douglass dies in 1895. Basically, each birthday after that, we had celebrations in our community for Frederick Douglass. And then also there were celebrations that we had in our community for Abraham Lincoln's birthday as well, after, Lincoln's assassinated in 1865. So because those two, you already had those celebrations taking place in the African-American community, Dr. Woodson inserted this new cultural holiday, this new cultural celebration into that period. Okay, so that's why it's in February. It has nothing to do with February being the coldest month of the year, the shortest month of the year, and it's not something white people gave us either. Right. I hear this myth also. White people gave us the month of February. No, we took it. Okay, we created this. To the class. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Scroll down past the first online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade. You can still register for that class. But this new one right here, Black Resistance Movements, this really ties into the political climate, what we see going on in America right now, the backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion, the resistance against any type of reparative justice or reparations, the attack on voting rights as well, the January 6, 2021 insurrection, which was political violence. All of this is what we see. The seeds of all this during this period of time from 1800 to 1970. Okay, so this 10-week online course, Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement. You can register right here for it. Click right here, register for full course. It's on sale, $80. You can register for both classes. We have a bundle pack for $120. It's about a $300 value. There's going to be some bonus content. You're going to get my Juneteenth lecture free when you register for this new class as well, Black Resistance Movements. Okay, so visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. and register for it, and we'll see you in class. Hotep, everybody. This is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network and host of the African History Network show. It is Sunday, June 23rd, 2024, and we are live. I wanted to come on and talk about my new online history course that is starting up today. I'm getting ready to jump off of here and start teaching this class. It's called Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. So this is an exciting 10-week online course that I'm teaching. I wanted to come on and give you all a brief overview of the class. Okay, so this class focuses in on history from 1800 to 1968 till about 1971 with the start of the war on drugs. Declared June 17th, 1971 by Richard Nixon. Okay. And this class focuses on what leads up to the Civil War taking place. What are some of the laws and policies put in place that lead us to where we are right now? We deal with the Jim Crow era, the Reconstruction era, in the aftermath of the insurrection that we saw on January 6, 2021 at the U.S. Capitol. Many leading historians drew parallels between the violence that we saw January 6, 2021 and the Reconstruction era, which is from 1865 to 1877. Okay, the Reconstruction era, right after slavery ended. The period of political revolution directly following the American Civil War. This was the Reconstruction era, and is going to be partly because of political violence that brings about an end to the Reconstruction era. And we also know that we have the Compromise of 1877 as well, where Rutherford B. Hayes is declared president, the Republican, and he agrees to the Democrats' demands to remove the Union troops out of the South. Okay. Now, this 10-week online history course will analyze U.S. history primarily from the African-American perspective, beginning in the period 1800 to 1865. But one of the things that we're going to highlight in this class is Black resistance and how we fought back to white supremacy and racism. Okay. This course looks at different ways African Americans fought back against racism between 1800 to 1968. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. We'll analyze U.S. history primarily from the African American perspective, beginning with the Haitian Revolution, which is 1791 to 1804, and the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, because the Louisiana Purchase of 1803 and the Haitian Revolution, those two events are related. And we know that the Louisiana Purchase is going to double the size of the U.S. at the time. And the U.S. is going to get 828,000 square miles of land from France. And one of the reasons why France sold this land is because France and Napoleon and were getting their behinds kicked by the Haitians in their colony of Saint Dominique that those Africans are going to call Haiti. Okay, and then we call it Haiti. And Haiti is the Arawak word for that island nation of Haiti. Okay, this is where that comes from, Haiti. And we talked about this in my class, the class that I taught yesterday, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That Haiti is an indigenous Arawak word, which means mountainous land, mountainous land. So we're going to deal with this history, and then you could trace that history of the island of Hispaniola, or what Christopher Columbus called La Isla Española, the Spanish island, and the word is anglicized to Hispaniola. And the island of Hispaniola is where you have the Dominican Republic and the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo, which the French take over that Spanish colony of Santo Domingo in 1697 and call it Saint Dominique, and that's where Haiti is today. Okay, so when we look at this history, even though we're looking at history from 1800 to 1968, we can trace this history back to the Moors going into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD, and what happens after that. Because we know it's August 3rd, 1492, that Columbus set sail on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and he's financed by Spain and King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. We know on August 2nd, 1492, Spain expels the Sephardim, the Sephardic Jews, and we know on January 2nd, 1492, during the Spanish-Grenadian Wars, the Moors lose control of their last stronghold in Spain, which was Grenada. Okay, so we see a chronology of all of this history. And then we see the Louisiana Purchase, which doubles the territory of the United States. The U.S. is going to carve out about 15 states out of that land they get from France. And France did not legally own that land. This is stolen land they got from Native Americans as well as African people who were already here as well. And we know from reading Dr. David Imhotep's book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, we know African people were here in this land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. Okay, so, this is already a given. Okay, so what we're going to see here in this class is a chronology of this history and what leads to the U.S. Civil War taking place. We'll look at things like the Missouri Compromise of 1820, okay, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. And after we look at the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. And after the Civil War ends with the, General Robert E. Lee surrenders to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, April 9th, 1865. And then you have June 19th, 1865, Juneteenth. But as we will look at in this class, we know that the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. Okay, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. We know that the border states of Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware, they were all exempt from General Order Number 3. Okay, delivered by Major General Gordon Granger. And, we just commemorated Juneteenth, and we should celebrate Juneteenth. But as you saw in the videos from my presentations for Juneteenth 2024, I said that we have to protect the history of Juneteenth and correct the history of Juneteenth. And June 19th, 1865, when those enslaved Africans in Galveston, Texas, got the word that they were freed, that was not the last day of slavery, because Kentucky and Delaware did not abolish slavery until December 18th, 1865. And that is when the 13th Amendment was adopted. We know that when Georgia ratifies the 13th Amendment, December 6, 1865, Georgia becomes the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment, and it becomes law, and it's adopted December 18th. So Kentucky and Delaware did not abolish slavery until 6 months after Juneteenth. So how could Juneteenth be the last day of slavery? Okay, so what a lot of these reports that you hear in the media are basically false about Juneteenth. Okay, so we go through and we look at some of these original documents. We look at the U.S. Constitution, Emancipation Proclamation, things of this nature. And the Reconstruction era is a very, very important period of history that's not talked about a lot in schools. Okay, and Americans, number one, are very ignorant of history, but Americans know very little about the Reconstruction era as well. You can register for this class because I'm going to jump off here and jump into to the class right now at our online school and start teaching the intro to the class. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Scroll down past the first online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade. You can still register for that class. But this new one right here, Black Resistance Movements, this really ties into the political climate, what we see going on in America right now, the backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion, the resistance against any type of reparative justice or reparations, the attack on voting rights as well, the January 6, 2021 insurrection, which was political violence. All of this is what we see. The seeds of all this during this period of time from 1800 to 1970. Okay, so this 10-week online course, Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement. You can register right here for it. Click right here, register for full course. It's on sale, $80. You can register for both classes. We have a bundle pack for $120. It's about a $300 value. There's going to be some bonus content. You're going to get my Juneteenth lecture free when you register for this new class as well, Black Resistance Movements. Okay, so visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. and register for it, and we'll see you in class. I want to go back to this PowerPoint presentation. These are some of the actual slides from the class. There are 80 to 100 articles that we look at in this course, and there are numerous slides that I put together for this class as well. There's 2 binders full of articles that I teach, because it's really close to about 100 articles that we look at here. So we go through, we look at the 13th Amendment. Now, contrary to popular belief, people think the 13th Amendment has an exception clause because it says, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So people are under this misconception, oh, well, this is why you have mass incarceration, because of the 13th Amendment. No, that's false, okay? What is the 13th Amendment? What law is the 13th Amendment based upon? The 13th Amendment is based upon what's known as the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 dealt with the Northwest Territory. It dealt with Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. The Northwest Territory is one of the main reasons why the Northwest Ordinance, I should say, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is one of the main reasons why places like Michigan, where I live, had very low levels of slavery, because the Northwest Ordinance basically abolishes slavery in the Northwest Territory. And when I did my presentation for the Detroit Reparations Task Force on March 2nd, 2024, some of you all have seen the video of that lecture because I've been rebroadcasting it on my social media platforms. I talk about the Northwest Ordinance there, officially titled An Ordinance for the Government of the Territory of the United States, Northwest of the River Ohio. The Northwest Ordinance was adopted on July 13, 1787 by the Confederation Congress. Okay, this is the same Congress. This is who drafts the U.S. Constitution. Okay, in 1787 at the Philadelphia Convention, the Confederation Congress, the one house legislature operating under the Articles of the Confederation. So the Northwest Ordinance chartered a government for the Northwest Territory, provided a method for admitting new states to the Union from the territory, and listed a Bill of Rights guaranteed in the territory. And one of the things that it did was basically forbade slavery. A Bill of Rights protecting religious freedom, the right to a writ of habeas corpus, that means having your day in court before, being convicted, the benefit of a trial by jury, and other individual rights. In addition, the accordance encouraged education and forbade slavery. So this is why, like in 1832, Michigan had in 1830, the U.S. Census showed Michigan only had 32 slaves. In 1773, we know Detroit had 73 slaves. Okay, but after that, in 1787, you're going to see a drastic decline in the number of slaves that the Michigan Territory has, and then Michigan becomes a state in the Union in 1837, and it gets admitted to the Union as a free state. So this is why I said that the people that, even though slavery did exist in Michigan, there was very low levels of it. And also many of the numbers that you see talking about the number of slaves in Michigan, that also included Native American slaves. And at one point, Native American slaves outnumbered African slaves 3-1. So this is why when we talk about reparative justice, we have to specifically understand the history of the city or state that we're talking about. We can't just run around talking about slavery, slavery, slavery. You owe us $17 trillion. That's not going to work. Yeah, I mean, go watch my presentation. I got deep into this. Okay, so so we go through and take you throughout history. We look at the Reconstruction era, right? The Reconstruction era is not talked about a lot in schools. And there was a excellent article from time.com, Time magazine, that I use in the class. And it deals with how schools are not teaching about the Reconstruction era. And the Reconstruction era is extremely important to understand because it helps us better to contextualize what is taking place right now. What is taking place right now? The attack on critical race theory, okay? The banning of books that are taking place, especially books dealing with the history of slavery and the civil rights movement, things of this nature. And then you have the initiative to reshape the federal bench, the federal courts, and the U.S. Supreme Court into an ultra-conservative court as well. So we see all this continuation, all these political fights, things like this coming from the Reconstruction era and going into the Jim Crow era. A new report finds that 45 states are failing to teach students about the period that shaped race relations after the Civil War. Now, this is an excellent article from January 12, 2022 by Olivia B. Waxman for Time magazine. And this was basically a year and 6 days after the January 6, 2021 insurrection. In this article, it says in the aftermath of the insurrection a year ago at the U.S. Capitol, many leading historians drew parallels between the violence that we saw January 6, 2021 and the Reconstruction era, the period of political revolution directly following the American U.S. Civil War. So Civil War is 1861 to 1865. Quote, now, Eric Foner is one of the top historians when it comes to the Reconstruction era. Okay. Historian Eric Foner said, quote, the events we saw reminded me very much of the Reconstruction era. Okay. The events we saw reminded me very much of the Reconstruction era and the overthrow of Reconstruction, which was often accompanied or accomplished, I should say, by violent assaults on elected officials. So whether we have like the Clinton, Mississippi riot of 1875, where President Ulysses S. Grant refused to intervene. He implemented his non-intervention policy, but he intervened in 1871 using the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, and he cracked down on Ku Klux Klan activity in South Carolina. He declared martial law in 9 counties in South Carolina, and this is after Congress passed the third of the enforcement acts, and this one is section 241 of U.S. Code, is known as the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Okay, now Eric Foner is the author of the book Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877. He said this in an interview with the New Yorker magazine published a week after the January 6, 2021 insurrection. Now, scholars say studying the aftermath of the U.S. Civil War can help put into context many of the most seminal events in the U.S. in recent years, from the brutal murder of George Floyd, May 25th, 2020, okay, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, by Derek Chauvin, to the voter suppression laws enacted after African-American voters played a big role in helping Joe Biden and Kamala Harris be elected president and vice president in 2020. But despite the timeliness of the era in today's climate, many students in American schools will not get a full education on Reconstruction until they get to college. But majority of them are not going to go to college. The Reconstruction era, understanding this is why when I talk about Juneteenth, I say we can't deal with just one day in history. Juneteenth leads you to the Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1877. It leads you to the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which allows African Americans to enter into legal contracts and negotiate wages. And it's the Civil Rights Act of 1866 that's being used against us now in these anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion lawsuits that white conservative Ed Bloom is filing. He filed it against the Fearless Fund, the African American women who give out grants to businesses of women of color. And Ed Bloom is saying that they're discriminating against white business owners. It played a part also when we deal with the affirmative action being overturned in college admissions. That was Ed Bloom, conservative activist Ed Bloom, who filed that lawsuit once again. So one of these Reconstruction laws and the 1866 Civil Rights Act, that was the foundation of the 14th Amendment of 1868. Now you have these white supremacists using these laws against us that were created for us. And this is why we have to understand this history and understand, and your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Okay. And this is why I say we have to practice political self-defense. Understanding how these laws and policies impact African Americans, impact our economic condition, how to weaponize our vote, how to fight back against these people, take them out of power, vote them out of office, and understanding how to protect gains that have already been made. If you don't understand history, you don't understand the gains that have been made. The attack on voting rights, Senate Bill 201, okay, coming out of Georgia. That's very similar to the attack on voting rights, African-American voting rights that we saw at the Mississippi State Constitution, the Mississippi State Convention in 1890, okay, shortly after Reconstruction ends. And they're rewriting the Mississippi State Constitution to oppose poll taxes and literacy tests, to suppress, it was specifically designed to suppress the African-American vote. There's an excellent article from the Washington Post called The Mississippi Plan to Keep Blacks from Voting in 1890. Quote, "We came here to exclude the Negro," end quote. Now, that quote, "We came here to exclude the Negro," is a direct quote from Solomon Saladin Calhoun, who was the white county judge who presided over the Mississippi State Convention. And he said, "Let's tell the truth. If it bursts the bottom of the universe, we came here to exclude the Negro. Nothing short of this will answer." Because African Americans were the majority of the population in Mississippi, and we were the majority of the voters. Okay. So they're trying to take back power. They imposed, the delegates eventually adopted a literacy test and a poll tax geared to suppress the black vote in a state with a black majority. The Mississippi Plan became the model throughout the South, part of a raft of racially oppressive Jim Crow laws that ended Reconstruction. What you're going to see is other states adopt similar laws. South Carolina, 1895, Louisiana, 1898, Alabama, 1901. You're going to see Georgia, Oklahoma. It's the same thing that happened after Senate Bill 201 passed. Okay. Out of Georgia, other states, especially many of these former Confederate states, they started passing similar bills. Okay. And what are they doing? They're cracking down on mail-in ballots, okay? And they're trying to find ways to suppress the votes of African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, white college students as well. It's not just targeting African Americans. We are the main target, though, because we have historically been targeted because there has always been a fear of African American political power in this country. Read the article from motherjones.com. Now, you know, I'm a national political commentator. You see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered every Friday. You see me on the African History Network show. I just did Attorney Areva Martin show this week as well, this past week. You know, she's a CNN legal analyst, Areva Martin. So I was on her radio show on 1580 AM KBLA out of Southern California, which is Tavis Smiley's radio station. I did the Carl Nelson show on WOLB Baltimore, Radio 1. I did his show on Monday, June 17th. We dealt with Juneteenth history and politics and the 2024 presidential election, etc. Look at this article right here, May 13th, 2021. Leaked video, Dark Money Group brags about writing GOP voter suppression bill across the country. Quote, we did it quickly and we did it quietly, end quote, said the executive director of Heritage Action. Now, this is an excellent article that I use in my classes. This is written by Ari Berman and Nick Sergey. Ari Berman used to write for thenation.com. And during the 2016 presidential election, Ari Berman wrote a series of articles dealing with the voter suppression that was taking place during the 2016 presidential campaign. And he has one article that deals with how there are 868 fewer polling places to vote at in the 2016 campaign. That's a direct result of Shelby County versus Holder, U.S. Supreme Court case of 2013, which gutted Section 5 of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Well, the reason why you needed the 1965 Voting Rights Act is because of what happened in Mississippi in 1890 at the Mississippi State Convention. And what happened in Florida in 1889 when Florida was the first state to have poll taxes, and what happened in South Carolina and Georgia and Alabama when they rewrote their state constitutions. This is why you needed the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And you've had white supremacists who've been trying to weaken the 1965 Voting Rights Act or revoke it altogether, basically since it was implemented. So quickly here, when we look at this piece from Mother Jones, okay, how many of you all know this? Senate Bill 201 was crafted by Heritage Action for America. Here's what happened. In a private meeting last month with big money donors, the head of a top conservative group boasted, I want everybody to see this. We're going to zoom in on this. The head of a top conservative group boasted that her outfit had crafted the new voter suppression law in Georgia and was doing the same with similar bills for Republican state legislators across the country. They did it with Senate Bill 201 in Georgia, and they did it with other similar bills in Republican state legislators across the country. Quote, in some cases, we actually draft them for them, end quote, she said, or we have a sentinel on our behalf, give them the model legislation so it has that grassroots from the bottom up type of vibe, end quote. The Georgia law had, quote, 8 key provisions that Heritage recommended. Jessica Anderson, the executive director of Heritage Action for America, a sister organization to the Heritage Foundation, told the foundation's donors at an April 22nd gathering in Tucson, Arizona, in a recording obtained by the watchdog group documented and shared with Mother Jones. Those included policies severely restricting mail ballot drop boxes, preventing election officials from sending absentee ballot request forms to voters, making it easier for partisan workers to monitor the polls, preventing the collection of mail ballots, and restricting the ability of counties to accept donations from nonprofit groups seeking to aid in election administration. Okay, now this law was signed into law by Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, and when he signed it, he was in a room with all white men. And he's sitting down at the desk, and above him is a painting of a slave plantation. Go research this when they did this, okay? But check this out. It gets deeper. Do you know who the Heritage Foundation is? The Heritage Foundation is an ultra right-wing conservative think tank, And they're the ones who engineered Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation. Have you heard about Project 2025? All of this stuff, all the history and politics is connected. This is what we deal with in this class. This is why I had to create this class, because the first course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade. So we deal with history going back thousands of years and deal with what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade. And we deal with the transatlantic slave trade like globally, and then deal with it here in the U.S. And, you know, we leave off like in the early 1800s. But I realized that crucial period of time from 1800 to 1970 or so, we really have to focus in to understand what happened during that period of time, because that puts us on a direct trajectory to where we are today, especially the collapse of Reconstruction and then going into the Jim Crow era. We look at the Lily White movement in 1928, which was the effort of Republicans to push African Americans out of the Republican Party, going back to 1928, when Republicans appealed to Southern segregationist Democrats in 5 former Confederate states to get them to vote for Herbert Hoover, who was the 1928 Republican candidate for president, and Herbert Hoover won. We know Herbert Hoover mishandled the Great Depression and loses to Franklin Roosevelt in the 1932 presidential election. Okay, so we get to see a chronology of all this history. But Project 2025, and you know, I talked about it when I was on Carl Nelson's show. We talked about it on. We've been talking about it on Roland Martin Unfiltered as well. But if you take a look at this, this is a 900 plus plan dealing with ultra right-wing policies that conservatives want to get put in place. And you have about 100 of these right-wing organizations that are signed on to Project 2025. I'm pulling up here an article. Okay, now there's numerous articles on this. Here's one from USA Today. If you haven't heard about Project 2025, you got to go research this. What is Project 2025? The Presidential Transition Project Explained. Now, this is from June 10th, 2024 from USA Today. This deals with giving more power to the president. This deals with getting rid of the Department of Education. This deals with the nationwide ban on abortion. This deals with weaponizing the Department of Justice as well. I mean, this stuff is deep. This deals with politicizing federal employees and getting rid of thousands of federal employees and implementing a loyalty pledge as well to be a federal employee. What is Project 2025? The Presidential Transition Project Explained. This is from the USA Today. The detailed plan to dismantle and reconstruct the government laid out by conservative groups known as the 2025 Presidential Transition Project has critics up in arms over its apocalyptic and authoritarian nature. The Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank in Washington, D.C., led an effort to create the more than 900-page Mandate for Leadership published in April 2023. So this is the type of planning these people are doing. Reimagining the executive branch, and presented a plan to overhaul several government agencies, including the FBI, for the country's next conservative president to follow. Now, the Heritage Foundation did something similar in 1980 with their Mandate for Leadership. And and that was a book in 1980 that contained 2,000 policies they wanted the Reagan administration to adopt. The Reagan administration adopted 60% of those policies in the first administration of Ronald Reagan. And these were a lot of anti-African-American policies. These policies calling for smaller government, attacking poverty programs, all different types of negative things like this. According to the project's website, the playbook provides a governing agenda and a lineup of people ready to implement it to, quote, rescue the country from the grip of the radical left. Rescue the country from the grip of the radical left. It includes a domestic and foreign policy agenda, a list of personnel, training, and a 180-day playbook. Read the rest of this here, dealing with Project 2025. Okay, there are numerous articles on this, and let me pull up something here. This is one from, let's see. This is one from hold on, I'm not gonna pull up that one. That's a video. This is one from Newsweek.com. Now, this is the ex-Republican National Committee chair. This is Michael Steele, who's African-American. And he's confronting, so on the weekend on MSNBC, co-hosted by Michael Steele, they just had the guy who's the head of the Heritage Foundation on the show. They had him on this weekend. It was Saturday. They had him on Saturday, June 22nd. Ex-RNC chair confronts Republican on Project 2025 plan to gut government, 2024. Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, confronted Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation, on Saturday over Project 2025, a plan that includes firing up to 50,000 federal government workers. A plan that includes firing up to 50,000 federal government workers. Now, African Americans make up 18.4% of the 370,000 federal employees. So when you talk about firing 50,000 federal government workers, you're talking about firing a lot of African Americans. In August 2023, conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, in collaboration with other right-leaning groups, published its Project 2025. According to its official website, the project aims to pave the way for an effective conservative administration by using a policy agenda, personnel, training, and a 180-day playbook should the GOP win the 2024 election, should Donald Trump win. This is what they're saying. Proposals include reintroducing legislation making it easier to fire federal employees, prosecution for distributing abortion pills by mail, and abolishing recently established diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives at the Department of Defense. However, one of the most significant proposals is a plan to reintroduce Schedule F, a Trump-era executive order rescinded by President Joe Biden. Okay, research Schedule F, the Schedule F employees, rescinded by President Joe Biden, that would see tens of thousands of federal workers reclassified, making them easier to fire. Once again, African Americans are 18.4% of federal employees. While the Trump campaign has previously said that outside groups do not speak for the former president, Project 2025's 1,000-page proposal was drafted with input from a long list of former Trump administration officials who are poised to fill top ranks of a potential new administration, according to the Associated Press. Newsweek has reached out to Trump's campaign via email for comment. Now, during Saturday's MSNBC's The Weekend, former RNC chair Michael Steele, who is African-American and the co-host of the program, he discussed the specific proposal of replacing federal workers, asking Kevin Roberts, a Republican, and the head of the Heritage Foundation about who will be replacing them, Quote, talk to us about what that looks like if Heritage is calling for removing 50,000 federal employees. Who are you replacing them with, and where do they come from? I suspect a lot of those people you are talking about have been in the federal service for a long time and served not just Republican administrations, but also Democratic administrations, Michael Steele said. Kevin Roberts mentioned political contributions as he claimed federal workers contribute to the Democratic Party. See, what they want to do is they want to go through and weed out federal employees, and they only want federal employees who will be loyal to Donald Trump. And that's not how federal employees work. Federal employees are not loyal to a president. They are employees that serve the country. They stay there for 20, 30, 40 years. They serve many presidents. They're not there to serve a president. What I mean is they serve under many presidents. They're not there to serve a president. They're there to serve the country, but they work under many presidential administrations. They're not there to be loyal to one person. That's not how this works. Quote, they have, and 95% of them who give political contributions give them to the Democratic Party. Kevin Roberts said, the head of the Heritage Foundation, they can donate to whoever they want to. You can be a federal employee and make political donations. You have a right to do that. However, Michael Steele interjected and asked, quote, so you're going to fire someone because they wrote a check to a Democratic candidate? Kevin Roberts continued by doubling down on the efforts to replace civil servants, calling them unelected bureaucrats. Quote, now we're going to fire someone. He said, no, quote, no, we're going to fire someone, and the number needs to be more than 50,000 people, considering there are more than 2 million federal employees because of over the last century, the radical left has seen the administration state as the fourth branch of government. They're unelected bureaucrats, but ultimately we have to devolve power from the imperial city of Washington back to the people. You listen to this guy. This guy sounds crazy as hell. Go to MSNBC.com. Go to The Weekend. Watch the interview that they did. That the TV, not the pop artist, The Weekend, not him. The political show on MSNBC, The Weekend. Okay, with Michael Steele and Simone and Menendez. Okay, go watch that. They interviewed Kevin Roberts Saturday, June 22nd, 2024. This dude sounds like a Trump bobblehead, full of conspiracy theories. And he's the head of the Heritage Foundation. This is the organization that created Project 2025. Not only that, the 226 federal judges that Donald Trump got confirmed, and the 3 Supreme Court judges, those judges came from lists submitted to him from the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. Go research that. Okay, read the rest of this article here. This is how deep this is. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history, because they both intersect. And when we study history from 1800 through 1970, and we're going to end in 1971 with Richard Nixon declaring his war on drugs after he ran for president in 1968 and won in 1968, and he won on the platform of law and order, which basically means lock up black people, protect white people. And he ran on a backlash to the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the rebellions taking place across the country, attacking the anti-poverty programs that the Great Society programs from President Johnson. He attacked a lot of those programs as well. Okay. So so how do you all like this type of information? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like. This is a very, very timely class. And this helps you to better understand what's taking place in the country right now, dealing with politics, news events, people reclaiming the Confederacy. We just did a story on Roland Martin Unfiltered where 2 schools in Virginia just voted to rename the schools after Confederate heroes, because they changed the names of the schools in 2020 when you had a racial reckoning taking place in this country because of the killing of George Floyd. Now you see a recalibration. Now you see people trying to go back to the way it was because they want to hold on to white supremacy. You have a lot of people that want to hold on to the Confederacy. We're going to deal with the Confederacy in the class, but nations don't name schools and don't have monuments honoring traitors to that nation. The Confederacy, these were traitors who committed treason based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution defines treason. And they committed treason based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Now, a minute ago, I talked about the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Okay, it was actually passed in 1871, right? How many people know that Traitor-in-Chief Donald Trump is being criminally prosecuted right now by special counsel Jack Smith using Section 241 of the U.S. Criminal Code? And Section 241 is the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. It's actually 1871, not 1870. How many people know this? Read this article here, okay? And once again, this is an example of how we see history and politics coming together, and how historical events shape policy and laws, and then laws shape historical events. This all happened during the Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1877. Read this article from the Washington Post. Trump is charged under civil rights law used to prosecute KKK violence. Trump is charged under civil rights law used to prosecute KKK violence. The provision was originally adopted in 1870 and was intended to protect the newly codified rights of black citizens after the Civil War. Well, it was the U.S. Department of Justice that was actually prosecuting these Klansmen. And the U.S. Department of Justice was created in 1870 largely to enforce the new rights of African Americans. That's during Reconstruction. Now, how many people learned all this in school? Okay, how many of your children are learning this in school? So then, when you see, this is why if you see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered and on the African History Network show, I tell you the work that Kristen Clark is doing in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, the work that Merrick Garland is doing, because the prosecution, the investigation, number one, and the prosecution of the January 6, 2021 domestic terrorists, that is the largest investigation the U.S. Department of Justice has ever done since they were created in 1870. And one of the main reasons why those domestic terrorists attacked the U.S. Capitol is because 16.9 million African Americans voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And then the day before that attacked January 5th, 2021, you had the special election in Georgia, once again, Georgia, and Senator Raphael Warnock won his election. Okay, the African-American senator, he won his election. And John Ossoff, the Jewish candidate, Democrat, he won his election, which gave Democrats a slim majority in the Senate. So there was a lot of racial animus that was driving this hatred that we saw explode in Reconstruction-like era violence and them assaulting over 140 police officers. Yet Donald Trump says he loves police officers and he backs the blue. But he sat there for 187 minutes in the White House watching it on television and did absolutely nothing. He backed the blue until the coup. That's what happened. He backed the blue until the coup. All right, so visit our website. How do you all like this type of information? Who still needs to register for this online history course? I'm about to get out of here and jump into the class and start teaching this class. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Scroll down. We have my new Juneteenth lecture there. It's a 3-hour lecture. If you register for this class, you're going to get the Juneteenth lecture in digital download format. Okay. But you can order it in DVD or digital download format. You can register for the first class I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Now, we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch these anytime. So even after the course is over with, you can still go back and watch the class. Okay. A year from now, 2 years from now, you'll still have full access and you can watch the class. This content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children. Okay, so it's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. And it's very visual. So there's articles that we reference, books that we reference. I show you usually the book references on the screen, so you don't have to buy any of the books if you don't want to. But register here. We're going to do a class introduction right now. I teach this at my online school, so you can register for this course. Click right here, register for full course at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We just posted a link here in the thread of the broadcast. You can also support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. That helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael. There's some like 5 or 6 fake African History Network Cash App accounts out there that I have identified, like these right here. Oh, and you can click on a Cash App link right here. Here's our QR code. Okay. And then here's our link for PayPal as well. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, finance our Sunday night show, the African History Network show. I usually do that Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our social media platforms as well. All right, we have to get out of here. Hopefully you learned a lot today. You can email me through the website if you have any questions, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll see you in class. Remember, right now is correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. And your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Okay, so we'll see you in class. Listen to the African History Network show. And Wakanda, right now is correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time.